Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 277 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on what should parents know about child therapy? And it is Thursday, the 4th of July 2024 as I record this. So today's episode is a really useful one, not only for psychology students, psychology professionals, but also parents, because a lot of psychology professionals are also parents. And sometimes I feel that when it comes to living and breathing clinical psychology, like a lot of us do, myself included, through our lectures, continued professional development and so on, sometimes and occasionally, especially if we're newer to the profession, we sometimes forget what it's like for a parent. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to children, and when children need mental health support, we always have to deal with the parents. And some parents are absolutely brilliant because they know stuff about mental health and they don't know the myths, or at least they've moved past the myths. But a lot of other parents who are brand new to this are brand new to the realization that their child needs support. Then they actually have one of two options. They can do the bad option, they can just not do anything because they don't want their child to be labeled, they don't want their child to be apparently disadvantaged because of this label, and they're quite happy letting their child suffer simply because for them that's the best option, because these labels are so damaging apparently. That's the option that I've experienced and I hate it. I will always have issues with the consequences of that. Or they have another option. Parents can learn the stuff and they can get their child mental health support, which is absolutely critical. So that's what part of today's episode is, though. Not only is it going to help psychology students and psychology professionals to understand how the parents think and some of the concerns that parents have, but it's also going to show parents that it's perfectly fine, normal, and very much encouraged to actually get your child mental health support. Of course, nothing on this podcast is ever any sort of official advice, but it's still absolutely critical. So you have that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. Moving on to the psychology news section, with reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is Stressed to Impress. Workplace small talk is similar no matter where you go. We love bringing up safe but boring topics like the weather, the latest viral Netflix series, or even just the weekend's football results. Occasionally, we talk about work itself, workloads, deadlines, and commonly how stressed we are. While sharing our stresses can serve as a bonding activity, sometimes talking about how stressed we are can constitute a form of bragging, hinting at our importance and serving as a badge of honour in the workplace. And the way we share our stresses, a new study finds, can have broader impacts on those around us. Writing in personnel psychology, Jessica B. Rowland and team find that bragging about how stressed we are can actually alienate co-workers, making us seem less warm and even less competent. Okay, so this one's definitely food for thought, because I know from stories that my mum has shared because of her work and the office environment. She's actually a really good example of this. So, because one of her co-workers about how stressed she is. And I mean, like, even though she's a brilliant person like this, a particular person who feels like she's always stressed, but does make her seem less competent simply because my mum does the same amount of the work and she isn't stressed though. So I do get that. So I definitely think that it's something to think about. Yes, we can share how we're stressed we are, but we shouldn't brag about it. I don't think there's anything to brag about stress because traditionally stress has been associated with quite bad mental health outcomes. But I know that there's the TED talk that I always recommend, even though I forget about it. I think it's called on YouTube How to Make Stress Your Friend, and it's a brilliant TED talk. I find it quite life changing because it's basically seeing, instead of seeing stress as something that's bad and something that's going to hurt you, in reality, stress is your body trying to help you overcome a certain stuff, and that's actually a lot healthier. Healthier. I definitely recommend that TED talk because it really does mention some really interesting studies. But I think at the end of this, the main takeaway from this Psychology News article is don't brag about stress. Yes, talk about stress in the terms of something that you can bond over, but don't use it to brag. It doesn't work. So the next one is spotting the wolf at the door. How trustworthy we perceive someone to be at first glance can be based on somewhat arbitrary factors. How attractive someone is, what facial expressions they happen to be making, or even how similar their face is to our own. For example, age can also affect who we choose to place in our trust. Not only do we take cues from how old others look, but some research shows that our age may tip the scale in how readily we trust. Older people are generally more likely to evaluate faces more positively than younger people, and considering that older people are often the targets for financial scams, this may have significant ramifications. In their recent paper, published in Scientific Report, Marilyn Horn extended our understanding of the interaction between age and perceptions of trustworthiness. Moving beyond just facial evaluations, the findings of their study suggest that older adults are less likely to identify when a trustworthy looking person is behaving in a non trustworthy way, potentially leaving them more open to harmful actions perpetrated by seemingly trustworthy figures. Okay, so this is a very useful one, mainly because, as the write-up said, so the main problem that the older members of our population face is that they're often the target of financial scams. So this is a very good theoretical bit though, and how we have these findings, as I often say, how do we apply them to the real world? So how do we make applicable? So basically, how do we protect the older members of our society from financial scams in particular? And sure, there are other examples here, but it's important to think about how do we apply this in the real world. Because part of me thinks it's just a case of telling the older people about what to look out for and stuff. But to be fair, we've been doing this for years and years, and the scams just keep getting more sophisticated. So I don't think that is the answer. I don't think education is the be all and end all. I really, really don't, because I mean, like, that just doesn't work. So I think we've got to come up with something else, and I don't know how you would apply this research enough to become really, really effective at helping elderly people understand when trustworthy looking people are actually taking advantage of them. What do you think? If you have any thoughts, I would love to hear from you. So the last one is, on your marks, get set, vote. The UK goes to the polls for the 2024 general election today. If you're heading out to cast your vote, don't forget your photo ID. And yes, I do remember that by the time this podcast episode comes out, the election would have been and gone. But there is one paragraph I particularly want to read. Also, I do just want to mention that if you want to understand more about the psychology of the voting, please check out the backlist of the podcast because there's 2 episodes that we do look at voting and behaviour. So definitely check them out. Most candidates have figured out that seeming similar to their target voters is a vote winner, but some factors that nudge candidates towards victory are a bit more subtle than photo ops at the pub. In 2019, then editor Matthew Warren covered research illustrating a slight difference between personalities of winning candidates versus their unsuccessful opponents. Winners, it seems, may score less highly in the measures of openness to experiences. Pros don't always get it right, though there are ways to fix that, according to guest blogger Juliet Hodges. So make sure to get out there and make your voice heard. And remember, once you're back from the polling station, you can always take your own journey through our archives using the Explore the Research Digest search bar on our homepage. So all I can really say about this election stuff, because this is not a political podcast, is simply always get out and vote. And yes, I probably should have mentioned this on Monday's podcast episode. Definitely go and look at the backlist of the podcast episode about the psychology of voting. It's really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and there's definitely some really important research findings. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section, so let's move on to the personal update. So moving on to the personal update. So this week has been involving a lot of moving stuff, settling into the new place, and a lot of different university work because, including a lot of different outreach events. And because I've been dealing with a lot of stuff, that's all I'm actually going to mention on today's personal update. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwiley@connorwiley.net. You can always leave a comment down in the show notes at connorwiley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-wiley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And today's episode has been sponsored by working with children and young people. So this is a perfect fit for today's episode because child therapy, of course, those working with children and young people, which is really important in clinical psychology because this book teaches you a lot of really good, really interesting topics that cover a wide range of questions that you might have. For example, what does the clinical psychologist actually do to help children and young people so we can improve their lives, decrease their psychological distress, and give them back control? That's a massive area of the book, and by the end of it, you will really understand how you, as a current or future clinical psychologist, can really make a massive impact. Also, what other professionals do clinical psychologists work with to help children and young people? That's a fascinating area. I flat out loved it. Also, even if you're not in the UK, it's really an important topic to actually think about is how our mental health services are structured. For example, what are CAMS in the UK? And this is a very useful topic, though, even if you're not in the UK, because it shows you the different tiers and the different way how psychological interventions are delivered and how different clients organise and rated in terms of severity, so that they can get specific help. And clinical psychology can try to help as many children as possible. Also, another really interesting one is what is pediatric psychology? It's a fascinating topic. We really do a deep dive into it because you will understand how do clinical psychologists help children and young people who have physical additions. So, and that is a brilliant topic because it really does prove basically once and for all how yes you might have a physical condition, but there's always a psychological aspect that could be causing you quite a lot of the stress. So it's how can psychologists help you with that? So it's fascinating book. I really did love it, and I'm always happy to recommend it because it's that good. So that is working with children and young people, available with all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Or you can get the audiobook version narrated by artificial intelligence at selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Google Play, Barnes& Noble, and Kobo, and selected library systems Baker& Taylor, Bibliotheca, and Overdrive. So whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, massive thank you to my patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. So if you wanted to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, now you can at patreon.com/psychology word podcast. If you want to give the podcast a bit of like one-time support, now you can buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content parts of today's episode. So we're moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about what do clients need to know about child therapy. And this is a really fun one, it's really useful, and it's very thought-provoking for all of us. So let's dive into it. One reason why I wanted to do today's podcast episode is because this is a very light episode compared to the trauma-related ones, but there are a lot of myths surrounding child therapy. A lot of parents are nervous, scared, and resistant to their child needing therapy, so they either don't take them, even though the child barely needs the support, or they create barriers to treatment. Something that only harms and doesn't help the child or young person. In addition, even though this podcast episode might be framed towards parents and non-psychology people, there is still a lot of aspiring and qualified psychologists that can learn from this episode, since this can help us to understand what are some of the things and barriers that we might need to address with parents in therapy. Now, we need to bust some of these myths and let's start learning more about child therapy. There needs to be trust to help your child. When it comes to child therapy, therapists can't help a child unless the child and the parent trust the therapist. This connects to the idea of confidentiality, because this is a key part of the therapeutic relationship, and a lot of different states and countries have strict laws around confidentiality for children. Some states in the United States of America have laws where the young person has near absolute confidentiality, so the parent cannot access any information about their child's therapy sessions, whereas other states have laws where the parent has all the permissions that the young person has. Whatever the situation in your state or country, a parent will be told when the therapist believes there is a serious risk to your child's safety. This always includes if your child is making plans for suicide. I understand if the parents are scared or nervous about the idea of confidentiality, and the vast majority of their parents want to know everything about their child so they can protect them. This is perfect in theory, but in practice, this just doesn't work because children don't share things or too much without the protection of confidentiality. Ultimately, without a level of confidentiality, the therapy will not be successful for the child, and the child will keep suffering. Personally, when I went to try and get my autism diagnosis back in 2019 during my first year at university, because my family refused to get me the diagnosis beforehand, and I was struggling badly. I remember it being one of the first questions I asked the university team: will my family be told about this? And if the answer was yes, I was going to refuse the initial meeting because it simply wasn't worth the risk. It's taken them about 4 years to be open to supporting an autism diagnosis, but as I've been saying to tons of friends, I needed this a decade ago. So it just goes to show how important confidentiality is when it comes to being open and wanting to tell a stranger, also known as a therapist, personal information. Parents might need to come to their child's therapy session. Whilst it won't be all the time, child therapy often in those therapy sessions with family members, especially when childhood trauma is involved, because in trauma-focused cognitive behavioural therapy, which is something we have a future podcast episode coming on in the future, Kalamavi and all 2017, does emphasise the need for a child and caregiver to have these sessions together as part of the therapy process. In addition, we do these family sessions because they can be really beneficial to the young person, as it gives them a place to express what they're feeling, and these family sessions can be powerfully healing. As a result, if a therapist invites you to a family session, this isn't because the therapist wants to punish you, shout at you, and tell you that you're the worst parent in existence. This is just a normal part of the therapeutic process. Personally, I definitely get the immense power of family sessions because honestly, it would have been lovely to have some family sessions for my situation last August. It would have been more structured, more focused, and more healing for all of us, I think. As well as even towards the end of my breakdown in August and July 2023, when I had this massive conversation with my family about everything, how they made me feel and everything because of the homophobia and other things, it was very healing, powerful, and it did change our family for the better. Therefore, there is immense healing in open and honest conversations, so it is critical to attend these appointments when you've been invited to them. Psychologists are experts in theory. Psychologists are expert in therapy and practice, not experts in your child. Even though clinical psychologists and other mental health professionals are highly trained and skilled professionals, we aren't experts in your child. Yes, the vast majority of therapists have achieved a master's degree or a doctorate, so they've been highly educated for at least 6 to 8 years, and they've received continued professional development ever after that. We acknowledge there is a lot more to family and people than we can ever learn in the classroom. This is why, despite psychotherapy training giving therapists the specific skills to practice different types of psychotherapy, we know that some techniques and experiential activities and strategies we use might seem mysterious to a parent because they don't know why we're doing them. For example, let's face it, an art therapy activity looks really weird when you think about it, especially because most lay people believe therapy is only laying on a couch talking about your mental health difficulties. So when a parent hears that their child is making art, that just smashes into the myths and confuses them. Whereas in reality, an art therapy activity can be very useful in helping a child to challenge a self-limiting belief or building rapport with them before the more in-depth therapy work begins. Ultimately, if a parent is ever confused about an activity, strategy, or whatever is going on in therapy, then therapists want the parent to ask questions. Parents shouldn't suffer in silence, and it is more than okay to ask questions and want to understand a little more. Make sure your child comes to the appointment. So, when I first came across this, I was rather surprised. It was even something I had to consider because this just made no sense to me. I couldn't believe that there were times when a parent just didn't want to take their child to the appointment. And and please note, I'm not honestly naive enough to think that clients always turn up to a appointment. But in an ideal world, they would, because you cannot get the professional help if you're not there. Of course, this can be difficult at times, especially with children. Therapists understand that after school clubs and family activities can make getting to a therapy appointment difficult at times because most therapists do have a few appointments outside of school hours. I talk more about this in a book coming out next year, but I was so happy and so impressed when a charity that I'm working with at the moment had some 5 to 8 p.m. appointments. That was amazing. These out of hour appointments are seriously impactful and potentially life changing for a client. Moreover, therapists really hope that parents want to work with them to make a time work for the therapy session because everyone wants the child to be okay and thriving. And I think the most important aspect to realize is that missing a therapy session certainly is not like missing a football or trumpet lesson. Missing therapy sessions add up. And these missing scenarios can throw a young person off if they're working through a particular treatment. Also, a lot of clients and parents don't know this, but therapists put a lot of time and thought into creating effective evidence based interventions outside of the therapy sessions. So I feel it's a little disrespectful to not try to come to the therapy sessions when the therapist has put in a lot of work. Ultimately, it is attending therapy sessions that give the therapy the best chance of working, being successful, and helping your child. Parents need to know seeking therapy is a wise thing, it isn't shameful. I was always going to end on this note because I strongly believe this is the most important message to focus on, and I see this in my own family. At the time of writing, there are more children and young people in therapy than ever. I don't think this is because the world's more dramatic, everyone is a snowflake, or whatever else the idiots say. I think this is because the stigma is thankfully decreasing, therapy is more accessible, and people are becoming more aware of when they need help. Furthermore, whatever the reason why a child or young person comes to therapy, there is no shame in it. It's okay if a child comes to therapy to work on a particular goal, to work through some trauma, or a mental health difficulty, or if they want to better themselves. All of those reasons are more valid, shameless reasons to come to therapy. I know I always talk about this, but it's important to know that there's nothing wrong with you if you come to therapy. The same goes for your family or your parents. There is nothing wrong with them if your child comes to therapy. You wouldn't hesitate in reaching out to a medical doctor if your child or young person was having heart problems or had a physical condition. So parents need to realize that the same goes for mental health. Reaching out for mental health support is just like reaching out for any other kind of health support. Ultimately, reaching out for mental health support is an act of love, and it shows that you care about their health and well-being. From personal experience, all I'll say is that this is a million times better than you knowing that your child is struggling and just leaving them to it, because you believe the stupid myths about children with mental health conditions have to go on medication and they're barred from going to university. Oh god, I still can't believe that was said. Conclusion. So I always enjoy learning about the myths and misconceptions that people create for themselves or others when it comes to therapy. In this episode, we looked at how parents need to trust us so we can help their child. Parents might need to come to their child's for family sessions, how psychologists are experts in theory but not the child. Parents need to make sure children come to their appointments, and how going to therapy is wise. It's a massive shame that there are a lot of these myths that become ingrained into the fabric of society, so parents, violin therapists, and everyone believes these damaging ideas. But if you're a current or future parent, then I hope you will now understand how important it is that your child goes to a therapy if they need the support, and you understand the truth behind some of these myths and misconceptions. If you're an aspiring or qualified psychologist, then again, I hope you understand the truth now. Yet, I also hope you might bring these ideas forward in your work, or they might make you more aware of what parents of our clients are going through. They will probably believe at least one of these myths, and that will create a barrier to treatment that needs to be addressed so the young person can be helped and thrived. Since that really is the job of a child therapist. Of course, it's about improving the child's life, giving them new adaptive coping mechanisms, and decreasing their psychological distress. But ultimately, child therapy is all about making sure a child can thrive for decades to come. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did, because child therapy is just fun. It's just really, really light. And sometimes that is what we need just in life, and even this a podcast though. Like, I never try to do a continuous line of really dense episodes, because I mean, like, that partly grates on me. It partly I imagine that it grates on other people. So that's why I really like doing these fun, really light podcast episodes from time to time. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, definitely check out Working with Children and Young People, available in all the usual places, and you can get the AI narrated audiobook at selected audiobook retailers, including Spotify, Google Play, Kobo, and selected library systems. And if you wanted to support the podcast on a monthly basis, now you can at patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Con Wiley. So have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.